All right, welcome everybody to a very, very special edition of Take the Black Live. We have two special guests here today. We have David Mandel, who wrote a couple shows. Let's see, there was one called Seinfeld, and then Veep, and then this other one, Curb Your Enthusiasm. So obviously, very, very, very funny man. Very jealous of the comedic skills there. And we also have with us here today Ryan Condell. He is late of writing a couple movies for The Rock. You might have seen Rampage and Hercules. And then he has a show just moved on to Netflix called Colony. And then, of course, near and dear to people on our site, he is the new showrunner, writer on House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones successor show. So welcome both of you guys to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, yeah.
Yeah, and so we're here today to talk about, you guys have your own podcast called Stuff Dreams Are Made Of, and it delves into everything you've never wanted to know about prop collecting in Hollywood. It is incredibly detailed. I've listened to the first two episodes. They're very fun. Both of your enthusiasm comes across very strong, and that's definitely a plus, I think, no matter what the subject matter is, because it kind of rubs off on people. So, like I said, they are heavy Hollywood prop collectors. And the new podcast, 10 episodes for the first season. Is that right, guys?
We're doing 12 actually.
12.
So it'll be six this year, and then we break for the holidays, and then 6 right at the top of 2021.
Okay, perfect. So one of the first things you guys talk about on the podcast is what y'all deem the collecting gene. So for anyone who hasn't listened to the podcast yet, which is available anywhere you get your podcast, tell us what the collecting gene is.
I believe it's a genetic abnormality, similar to to the X-Men, I guess a little bit, sort of a mutation, if you will. No, it's just this funny thing where it's a theory I think we both ascribe to, which is that you're just a born collector. You are, it's not, I guess it can be nurtured, but you're born, it's not a choice. You just are a collector. And you just see it. And, speaking for myself, I was that kid, and I always had little collectibles and things that I wanted to get all of, and it eventually made its way to baseball cards and comic books and toy collecting, and then eventually original comic art, and now movie props, and it just, I don't know, left to my own devices. I mean, it's not hoarding, but it's not hoarding either, and it just, you have it. And I say on the podcast, I have 2 kids, and I can tell one of them has the gene and one of them could care less. And it's just funny. You do or you don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking more about this as we've gotten deeper into this podcast. And I always said, kind of started with baseball cards and Star Wars toys and, comic book, all the stuff that you kind of hear generally. And then I was thinking, actually, it even started even earlier because my Nana, my mom's mom, who's actually still with us, she used to collect like American coins. Nothing crazy. She wasn't going after like gold double eagles or anything like that. But I remember we would fill these like press-in penny books together. I mean, I must have been like 4 or 5, trying to get all the years. And she had these jars of old coins. And when an old relative would pass, she would inherit their big, those big, change jars. And we would go through them and find the little steel pennies from World War II, when they stopped using copper, and all those little, interesting ones. I just remember thinking, oh man, one day I want to own a 1909 VDB penny. It was like the first of the modern run of the penny with the 1 cent and the little Caesar leaves on the back of it. And I mean, I must have been 4 or 5, and I just remember the obsession of like searching through all those pennies trying to find it. And it's like, I'm just totally born with it. I mean, my brother could not care less about any of this stuff. So
yeah, sometimes when my mother is cleaning our place where I was raised in New York, she'll just send me a box of stuff. Like she'll take a drawer or something and just go, do you want any of this? And send it. and I'll go through it and I'll go like, oh wow, I forgot. I kind of collected stamps for a year or two. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's that, it's just hilarious. And by the way, you can still use those stamps on letters. I mean, you got to put a lot of them on,
A lot.
but they do work.
Definitely. And I like that you mentioned it's a bit of an obsession. So is there ever a point where where you sober up, so to speak, when you're going after something where you're just like, okay, this is ridiculous. The price is too much. I'm spending too much time. Any point like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I'll say three things in no particular order. I do think my collecting, as you can imagine, did change when all of a sudden I had a wife and children. I mean, it just did. I think, again, first of all, just time-wise. I mean, I used to work a lot, like, if I was working on something, and I would work, and when I wasn't working, I was talking about collecting, meeting with collectors, trying to find things. And then somewhere in there, that, you have wife and kids, and both, you work, if you can, a little less, and the collecting thing gets pushed where it gets pushed to. So that's number one. Number two, as you start thinking about things, and look, let's be honest, things like, what does college cost and what does school cost? I mean, again, let's just be honest about these things. And I'm lucky enough to have a silly job that does, overpay me, but still you start to think about those things and you start to prioritize certain other things. And so that changes stuff. But I am lucky enough to have a large collection. So I do occasionally have things where if I'm going to go crazy, I start to think to myself, I have to force myself. what am I going to sell? What am I going to sell to pay that next thing? Sure. And these are thoughts that maybe I didn't have 10 years ago. So that's some of the differences, I guess, for me as a, later collector, I guess. That's the easiest way I can put it. It's just facts of life.
Yeah, I think for me, it's always like I collected a bunch of things before I got to original movie memorabilia. That was sort of the last stop. So I had trained myself in the, I would tell you, I haven't opened my long boxes that are stored away in my mother's attic still, that she's begging me every summer to please come get out of her house. But I haven't opened them in a long time. But I know when I do, I will find very embarrassing runs of comics that I do not remember buying and collecting. I do know that Dark Hawk is in there.
It's not even the comics. It's whatever you thought might be worth something.
Yes.
The realization that sort of post, I guess, really the 70s, there are 7 comic books worth anything, and everything else is worthless. And I was...
You mean my polybagged run of the Executioner's Song, Dave, in perfect condition is not going to be worth that much?
I don't want to make you cry. I'm just going to tell you, at some point or another, about a couple of years ago, I shut down my New York storage unit and had everything shipped out. And I realized, besides the shipping out, which was X number of dollars, I had been paying thousands of dollars for a storage unit in New York City. And I had all these long boxes. I'm like, okay, are these worth anything? And a friend of mine, a comic book guy, went through and he was like, I think these 6 boxes here might be worth a couple of grand, which more or less covered the shipping out. And then he said, and then the rest of it, which was like at that point, like 30 or 40 other long boxes of comics, he goes, I don't know, $50 a box. And I was just like, my life. And so I guess at least if they're not in a storage unit, that's something. Man, oh man, yeah. I thought these were the comics that I thought I would retire on.
Yeah.
And honestly, other than if there is one day Waterworld where paper is worth millions of dollars, nothing, just nothing. Yeah.
Well, and this is pretty terrible paper as far as paper goes, so even that would be kind of a
But I guess at least in Waterworld it would be worth something.
I guess. But yeah, I mean, I sort of burned out the kind of dumb, sort of, side road thing on doing other things. I mean, I remember when I talk about this in the podcast, but I used to collect replica props, which are basically, replicas that are either licensed or unlicensed. I mostly collected the unlicensed stuff, the stuff that was handmade and built more intricately, because I liked that the sort of limited one-offing kind of nature of that. And I amassed a kind of embarrassingly large collection of that stuff that I sold off. Once I got into original props and I was like, yes, this is what I want to be and want to do, I was like, I don't need any of this stuff anymore at all. I kept a couple of things just like earlier on that I loved, but I basically got rid of the rest of it. And I just remember I kept a spreadsheet as I was, selling and dealing, and I could not believe how much of it I had, how much I had spent on it, and how much it was worth presently. So I did pretty well. Like the license stuff I did very well on, because all that went way up because it was basically like, high-end toys. The unlicensed stuff, you break even, you maybe do a little well or do a little worse or whatever. But I could not, my life, I was sort of going through that experience. It wasn't, a storage unit in New York, but it was like 50 pieces. I couldn't believe that I had that much. But now I'm very regimented. If my rule is, if I'm not going to display it, I'm not buying it. And that's sort of the rule that I live by, and it keeps me very, zen and centered, and it's worked for me so far.
And I have no such rule.
That's a good rule. I collect autographs and things of that nature as well. And I have a giant closet full of stuff that I just can't display. So that's a great rule. But one of the things you guys talked about on the podcast was just the interactions that you have with people that you end up buying a prop from when you track them down and things like that. And I was struck by kind of those conversations because like in the autograph community, there's, we have like message boards and things like that, and stories get around about different celebrities, athletes, and things like that. For instance, Jerry Seinfeld, I know he has a thing about people touching him or shaking his hand. And so word got around, as long as you stayed a certain distance, Jerry was super cool. But he didn't like people in his personal space, which, understandable. But there was things
ended up being very prescient. He was ahead of his time.
Right. Yes. Right. Well, yeah, exactly. Nowadays, for sure. So, what's been kind of your favorite story tracking it down in as far as how much work it took, and then your favorite interaction with somebody, even if it was just an easy person you picked up the phone, but your favorite interaction you have with somebody when you're tracking down a prop.
The craziest for me, and I tell a version of this story in the second episode, I actually hired a private investigator to track down. There were these pieces of Star Wars art, so it's kind of movie prop adjacent, but they were, made, connected to the production for the marketing that were used for the Burger King drinking glasses and posters that they gave out in 1977 when the movie came out. It was a Coca-Cola Burger King production, and everyone I knew had these posters. I still have a set of these drinking glasses. You can buy them on eBay. And I was trying to find this art, and I had a couple of clues again, I tell the whole story, but I had a couple of pieces of information on who had them. And I hired a private eye going, here's this person, here's kind of what I know, here's an old email that's not working. I think this is their initials and maybe the first name and the last initial. And the dad worked at Coca-Cola. Can you find them? And the private eye found them. And when the private eye contacted me, kind of went, here's the person, here's his phone number, he's waiting for your call. He was really amused by this. And the guy and I actually became friendly because he kind of got like a real kick out of the fact of how badly I wanted the stuff, how that I hired a private eye. I guess it could have gone another way, but it was pretty enjoyable. On the flips, not on the flip side, but on a different version of it, over the last couple of years, I got to know Joe Johnston, who worked on the Star Wars movies. He did storyboards, but he also built models and painted them, and then he became a director in his own right. And a couple of years ago, through someone that was working for him, he was selling some things, and I bought a couple of things, through the assistant on eBay, but then ultimately got to meet Joe, and separate from buying anything, just as a director, as somebody, who works in the industry, we've had, gotten to know him and had a couple of, meals together. And that's just been really enjoyable. You know what I mean? So, things come out of these things in different ways.
For me, I mean, the craziest was I'm a big fan of the movie Tombstone,
Mhm.
which the famous western about the Wyatt Earp and the OK Corral,
Sure.
and it was sort of a surprising hit. It came out in the same year or the same year, 12-month period as the Kevin Costner one, which was supposed to be the awards contender and the kind of highbrow one. Larry Kasdan wrote and directed it, but Tombstone ended up being the sort of the run and gun version ended up being the more popular film. And I saw it, I saw it when I was a kid. I loved it. And I'd always wanted something from it. And I managed to track down the armorer who supplied all the guns to the film. And he was this cowboy that lived a little outside Los Angeles, and he ran this group called the Buckaroos. So they hired him as like an all services Western guy. So he supplied not only he sourced all the right guns because he's a Western historian, so he knew the right guns to put into the movie, but also the cowboys and the horses and everybody to do all the kind of the stunts and the riding and teach the actors how to do whatever. So he was like a full service dude that they just hired to come in. So he's a character. And so I tracked him down. He had a landline, so I had to call, and no answering machine. So I had to call and try to get him to like pick up when he was like at the house. So we started up a conversation. He was very charming. He brought invited me out. So he lives on this crazy farm with the horses and and guns, and there was like a tank out there, just crazy stuff. And telling all these stories. And these guys are like they're cowboys. I mean, you can only believe so much of the tall tales that they tell you. But he pulled this thing out, and he had Wyatt Earp's buntline special, the hero one from the movie. There were 3 made. He had the one, and we talked, and it took months and months of back and forth. He told me he wanted a fortune for it, and then the fortune got smaller and smaller as we went along. And then once he realized I was actually serious and was actually going to pay him real money for this thing, he kind of got serious about it. But it was just many drives up into this place where I kept wondering whether I was going to get blackjacked by some cowboy and have my have the wheels taken off my car. But he ended up being very nice, and we actually stayed in touch over the years. He ended up writing a book about his experiences on Tombstone. So that was fun. There was a lot of legwork, a lot of eating dust up in the California desert. In terms of interaction as a fan, I actually got to meet John Milius, who is a hero of mine. And I as a writer, I love to Conan the Barbarian, talk about this on the podcast. All of his writing, very inspired by him, and I became friendly with the guy that created the documentary about him called Milius, which is excellent and worth seeing for anybody who's even casually a fan. And one day he was like, "Hey, he's in LA. Do you want to go meet him?" And I said, "Oh yes, that would be great." So he brought me over. And John had a stroke in the last 10 years, so talking is tough. But he has this assistant who can kind of translate for him, so he understands everything you're saying. It's just hard for him to get it out and vocalize. But it just sitting there with him, and I got to tell at this point I already owned my Conan sword, so I wasn't actually specifically looking for anything from him. But I got to tell him that I had one of the swords. He thought that was great. He thought it was great that I wrote Hercules because he loves history and all that. He's telling me all these stories. And I asked him where his Conan swords were, and he told me he lost them, which was heartbreaking. But then he must have found them because years later they ended up actually in an auction somewhere. But I remember he went into the back and he was like, wait a second. He comes out and he brought out like 6 handmade Italian shotguns. Like he collects these beautiful, the over under, kind of skeet shooting shotguns, and just laid them all on the table and showed them to me and had me open them and look, it was amazing. It was great. It was, they say don't meet your heroes, but it was really, it was exactly the kind of meeting, I would have wanted to have with John Milius. So it was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things I loved that I believe is on the second episode you guys mentioned about, and it's kind of the same realm, but you talk about how when you're showing your collection, it's almost more enjoyable to tell the story of how you got the item and where it came from and the story behind it than it was about the actual item itself sometimes, which I totally connected to because I enjoy telling the story of where I got this, how I got this, how it all went down, as opposed to, there's a basketball right here or there's a movie poster or something like that. So, but the flip side of that is Is there a prop in y'all's collection that keeps you up, that the provenance keeps you up at night? And follow-up question, have you ever had a prop that you later found out was not genuine?
I guess I don't know if there's anything left that keeps me up at night. There were definitely pieces I've had over the years that I wanted to know more about, I guess is the honest answer. I had a Darth Vader helmet that I bought, and I tell the story on one of the shows, but I've lost track of which show, but not in the first two.
So download the whole season and listen to all of it.
Yes, you have to subscribe to hear the rest of this. But the gist of it was, I purchased it in an auction. George Lucas had put it in a DGA auction years ago, and it was put into the auction as a screen-used helmet. And over the years, as I and other people have learned more and more about Darth Vader helmets, I began to think that whether it was or wasn't screen used was one discussion, I learned enough about the helmet to start to go, I think it's one of the tour suits, meaning not a suit made for the movie, but made to do appearances for the movie.
Sure.
Now, the way the archives work, they just grab stuff and sometimes put things on screen. So, for example, there's another tour suit where the helmet was used for the poster of Empire Strikes Back. So again, what it was made for and whether it was used or not, again, are two separate discussions. But at some point or another, it was sort of mounted in this very complicated way. They had done it, the way Lucas had given it to the auction, he didn't want, I guess, people wearing it. So it was kind of mounted. And so I had to take it off and unscrew all of this stuff. And then there was some cement glue that I had to kind of make sure I wasn't hurting the helmet. But I finally kind of, after years of owning it, got it all apart to be able to go, okay, this is a tour suit. Now, again, they're saying it was used, great, but I kind of was able to lock in exactly what it was. And eventually, when a non-tour suit with a screen match came up later on, I was able to kind of do an upgrade and kind of go, I'm going to sell this and buy that. And again, it wasn't keeping me up at night, but I needed to know what it was. That's the simplest answer. I don't want to be the guy. And unfortunately, there are people that do want to be the guy that I've met people where they go, what do you think of my Superman costume? And in my mind, I'm going, I'm pretty sure that's a fake, but I'm also pretty sure they don't want me to be the one to tell them that. Sure. I have always said to all my collecting friends, I want to know. If you see something wrong, tell me, because I don't want to be the guy going, look at my Superman suit. Sure. So over the years, the one or two pieces, and I've had one or two pieces that I'm pretty sure were fakes, I've gotten rid of them, or I've just thrown them in the garbage, or I go, this is a fake. And then, like I said, with that piece, it wasn't so much it was a fake, but I wanted to know exactly what it was. Right. I want to know. So that's my answer. And with autographs, I mean, you collect those. I assume it's the same thing if you're buying something that you are not getting in person. Obviously, it's a different thing where you were there and they signed it. But I have some Star Wars. I have Star Wars autographs, and certainly for someone like Alec Guinness, who's long dead, I made sure that I was talking to a guy I know who is a Star Wars autograph expert, who I was able to send and go, what do you think of this? And he goes, that's a fake. That's a well-known fake. And then when I went, what do you think of this Alec Guinness Obi-Wan one? He goes, that's right. And here's why you know it's right. Because I don't know. I want to know. That's the honest answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, same for me. I think, and that's the mark of a serious collector versus somebody. I mean, look, none of us want to have a fake in our collection. We just want to know that so we can correct it or go back at the auction house where we bought it, or the collector we bought it from, or whatever. But I'm also of the mind that I want to know, and I try to make that known so that if somebody sniffs something out in my collection, they will tell me, and I don't have it sitting there for 10 years thinking it's real and it's not. I have a piece that I'm not worried about it being a fake because it's got all the right story and everything, but I want to know what it is. And I have one of the Holy Grail chalices, the cup of the Carpenter from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Right.
And it has a like a ball bearing in the stem at the base where the cup would sit on the table. So you actually can't rest it on the table because it's not stable. You kind of have to hang it up. And it was sold, the provenance, I came from another collector, but before that he had bought it in the early 90s through a Christie's auction. So it had pretty good provenance. I don't know how many people in the early 90s, which was 3 years after the film was made, are making fake Indiana Jones Holy Grail cups with ball bearings in them. And so it's something. And it looks completely right, because there's actually, it's a well, I don't know, faked prop, but it's a heavily replicated prop, because replica collectors like to have the Holy Grail cup. They're not, none of them are right. They all look, the shape isn't right, the paint isn't right. There's a very specific finish done to it. It's cast and then made to look like it was made it on a potter's wheel. It's really brilliantly done. The gold leafing inside, you look at it and you're like, this was made by an artist a very long time ago. I don't know what it is, and it's been suggested that it was part of the special effects sequence at the end when the temple collapses, and when they needed the cup to roll around, they wanted to be able to either reel it back in or control how it rolled. So there was thinking that maybe there was a bracket of some type attached to it so that they could do this kind of controlled roll with it. I haven't been able to really track it down. I actually got to not one-on-one, but sort of through another collector, got to one of the guys in the art department that worked on the special effects props for Last Crusade. But he's an older guy, and he was just like, I have no recollection of, he's like, it looks right, but I have no recollection of what this is or what this would have been. I'm not saying it was sort of a nothing answer. So I don't know. I was able to find, there's also a seam that runs through it from the casting that matches another known correct real cup. So I know it's right, but I want somebody to come in and say, yes, I built that. This is the sequence it was used in. This is what it's for, but it just hasn't happened yet.
And I was just going to say, by the way, Ryan, and I'm sure you've thought of this too, it also could be that they built a contraption, tested it, didn't like the way it looked, and moved on to another method, which still means it was made and whatever, just they then went, oh, this ball bearing thing, that's not going to work. Moving on. And that is part of the I mean, that's an interesting one, unless like, oh, it's a fake. But on the flip side, there are unfortunately a lot of fakes, and we see them all the time. I mean, eBay is littered with them.
Sure,
eBay, and I'm sure again this is the same with autographs, fakes with fake certificates of authenticity. Anybody can just make a certificate of authenticity.
Right.
They're meaningless unless they are from, I would say, certainly one of the major studios, and like the studios don't do their certificates of authenticity in crayon. That's a hint or a clue.
Yeah, that's a little known fact, but Dave and I have done years of research and be able to find that out. Now, my favorite fake is the fake that has the signed fake prop by the actor who possibly doesn't even recall making the movie or using the prop. There's nothing quite like the authentication by the actor that had nothing to do with the making of the prop or the making of the movie, other than stepping on set that one day and holding it.
Basically, someone like waited in line and paid $50 and got them to sign the helmet.
Right.
They'll, $50, I'll sign whatever you want. This is a paid signing. Doesn't mean my signature means this is a screen used aliens helmet from the colonial Marines. I mean, it's, and the thing that we talk about a little bit on the show is that there are, as the collecting has gotten more, I guess, out there, and people are reading about it, and it's attracting people. And like anything else, I think you see it in sports cards and whatnot, that people with money, or a Wall Street guy wants to like buy a cool piece for his office or whatever it is. That same guy spends years and hours analyzing stocks, but then just goes on eBay and spends a ridiculous amount of money on a Superman costume because it's just there without doing any research. And that really the mantra of our show is always just do your research.
But it was signed by Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, yesterday. That's the weird thing. He signed it recently. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the same. And personally, I never purchased anything if I ever purchased anything, it was from someone, a fellow collector I knew and who I trusted. I know he got that from whoever that person was. Never, I mean, eBay, anything like that. I mean, you run into all kinds of scams and fakes and things like that. And so it's definitely, to me, important as well to know the provenance of the item, where it came from, how did you get this? Because people will show up, I had someone ask me the other day, she wanted to buy, she saw, it was a family friend of ours, and she wanted to buy something for her husband for Kobe Bryant. And she sent me this item, and I said, listen, I don't know if it's fake or not. I do know Kobe was one of the hardest person's autographs to get when he was obviously still with us. And he never did paid signings. He never, you had to catch him in the right mood. You had to have like a giant billboard. Somebody wrapped their car in it, and they got him to sign one autograph. So, there's things like that where it's like, yeah, and it's the same thing with props. I'm sure you guys know when something comes up, you don't necessarily know per se, but you have a feeling. You just kind of know the background of a different item, and you can kind of tell right away if it's not genuine or something.
Yeah. For example, I have a picture. Well, it's hard to explain what it is, but basically it was signed supposedly like 3 weeks ago by Christopher Reeve and Kobe Bryant, right. And I'm pretty sure it's real. I mean, I'm pretty sure.
You have a good feeling about it.
Yeah, I got a good.
Yeah. So it is, I definitely am the same way. I want to know where this came from. I definitely don't want to have anything in my collection where I don't know where it came from, or it might be fake or something like that, because there's too much of it out there. So is there any type of specific item you guys find yourselves gravitating towards? I know, Ryan, in the first episode, you've mentioned a couple of the weapons, the sword, the pulse rifle. Is there, do you guys like clothing? You like the weapons? Is there something that you guys find yourselves gravitating towards over and over?
I love hand props. I mean, I think that's sort of what you've gotten to there. I mean, I have an Indiana Jones whip. I love that stuff, but I've really kind of expanded out over the years. Now it's the movie. Unfortunately, the movies that I collect are the movies that everybody wants. The sort of gold star standards from the 70s and 80s. So you can't be that picky all the time. Sometimes you just have to get the cool thing that's available, as long as it like ticks the box. And I'm always looking for A pieces from A films. I mean, that's really what that's my my mantra. So I think if I had my druthers, it would probably be a hand prop if I'm just picking something. But otherwise, I just really want something that's emblematic of the film and the character, that's recognizable. One of my favorite pieces that I got in the last couple of years is just a shirt. It's a shirt that Harrison Ford wore as Deckard in Blade Runner. But it's custom. It's not off the rack. It was custom made, for him, for the film. You can tell it's custom material. It has that kind of golden age sort of studio make feel to it. And it's, again, just a shirt, but it's from the end sequence when he, goes into the Bradbury building and confronts Batty. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So it's really, it's much more dependent on I think on the film versus, that's a hand prop versus a helmet versus, others, but other collectors are different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things we do in every episode is we sort of play this little game at the end of the episode where we sort of challenge each other with like a movie of like, what would you want from that movie? And some movies are harder than others. I think neither of us are big, even though Ryan just mentioned the shirt, we're not big wardrobe collectors across the board. I don't have a lot of like so-and-so's suit from a movie. I do think there are things like Deckard's shirt from Blade Runner that are recognizable and very specific, but there are a lot of movies to me where a suit's a suit, you know what I mean? And yes, it might be so-and-so's suit, but I am, again, same thing. I'm looking for that one piece that for me just kind of goes like, oh, that's from that movie. Yeah. And sometimes it's harder, but when you find the right thing, and by the way, my right thing is not your right thing, and your right thing is not Ryan's right thing. And so, for example, I picked up a small piece a couple of auctions ago out of Marathon Man, which is a movie I love, 70s and all that kind of stuff. And what it is it's one of the little boxes, little metal trays of, well, in the movie they're supposed to be real diamonds, but they're fake diamonds. But it's the little tray of fake diamonds. They're basically the way the Nazis smuggled the diamonds that they stole from the Jews out of the Holocaust. And now, this is what the whole movie is about. And for me, it's this little slice of, I know exactly what that is. And again, that may not be the same for you, but for me, this movie I love, in some ways, it's the MacGuffin, it's the driving force, this diamond heist that sort of is the whole movie. And it's these crappy little metal trays that to me are instantly recognizable. Again, more so than perhaps Sir Laurence Olivier's overcoat in the same movie. And again, that may not be it for you, but for me, it's perfect. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm looking for something.
But Dave, I'm curious, would the Laurence Olivier's overcoat in the film violate your no Nazis policy? You have a very stringent no Nazis policy with your collection.
I do, and I guess I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I guess he's a sort of a later in life Nazi. I mean, I guess I wouldn't go for the coat probably anyway, although I guess I have this sort of contraband diamonds. But then in defense of the overcoat, it is swastika-less. There is no, I think it's just a camel hair coat. So, yeah.
It's the coat of a reformed Nazi.
Well, he's not reformed, but he just, I don't know. I don't want the coat, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we worked that out.
I love that you brought up the game y'all play at the end of the episode, because I wanted to do a variation of that and ask what prop from each other's collection would you take if you were ever...
A-hole. I just wrote this down on a piece of paper that Ryan, I haven't even told you this. I had this idea to do sort of an episode or a segment about collecting jealousy, because it's something I think I've run into in my collecting. Like there's one or two guys in my collecting world that I don't even speak to anymore because, for lack of a better word, my collecting made them so crazy that they turned on me in some strange way. And I thought a fun part of this would be what we had in each other's collection. But we'll do it here, and we'll figure out how to change it for the show. That's okay. You want to go first while I think for an answer?
Yeah. So I know my answer. So Dave I
think I know your answer too. So go on.
Yeah. So Dave has this amazing piece that I think you got maybe right around the time that I met you too. Is it possible that I was there when you got it, or was like,
yeah,
here I finally got it?
Possible that that was the night, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like over 10 years ago at this point. But Dave actually has Harrison Ford's firing solo blaster from Return of the Jedi, the actual functional gun that was made by Stembridge Props with all the hardware attached to it, because Harrison, very, very famously hated doing the pew pew action on set and wanted something with feedback. So he always wanted a real gun. I mean, even the Deckard gun, actually fired, because he always wanted to be able to act against something that was actually happening. Right. And the reason it wasn't in the Lucas archives is because it was a firing gun. So we'll do a whole episode on movie guns, but a lot of movie guns actually survive the studio archives and go back to the armorers that supplied them to the film, because they're very heavily regulated and whatever. So Dave in a way was very lucky, was able to get this thing because it didn't come, it wasn't in the Lucasfilm archives, it came through another place. But it is just like, Han Solo is my favorite character. Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie because that was the one I saw in the theater as a kid and wore out the VHS tape, because Empire Strikes Back bummed me out. Now I love that one, of course, but the sense memory of Return of the Jedi is very strong. I put on that movie and I just smile ear to ear every time I watch it. And I just, I've had this experience 3 times as a collector, where even my jaded old, sort of grizzled ass was like, this is the most amazing thing. I can't believe I'm in the presence of this thing. And that was one of those 3 times. It is just the greatest thing. It's amazing. I love it. Yeah, that's the one. I
will say, as the owner of it, it's all of Star Wars wrapped up in one object in a way that not often is. Even though you strive for those pieces in your collection, this one is. It's jammed packed with Star Wars-ness.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, don't leave Ryan in the room with it.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, what?
I said, don't leave Ryan alone in the room with it.
No, never.
Yeah. Dave, it was always a water pistol. It's a well-known thing that Han Solo, Harrison Ford, liked to use a water pistol. I don't know what you're talking about.
One of the great things about both COVID and Ryan moving to London is I don't have to worry about him stealing from me as much as I used to. I'm trying to think for you, Ryan. I'm going back and forth probably between two pieces. One maybe you know, and one maybe that'll surprise you. The one piece that we talked a lot about on the show is the hero sword from Conan. It's this just masterful, heavy, real sword made by a sword master. I mean, it really is something.
Well, like you said, it's the whole movie in one object, right?
Yeah. All of that Conan movie and Milius and everything in this one object. And it is incredible. But semi-recently, and I was kind of with you for the entire acquisition of it, Ryan added a piece to his collection about a year ago, right? Or 2 years ago at this point. So I'm losing all track of time. But it's a hero jacket from the first Terminator movie. And that was about the last
about
years.
2 years ago, yeah.
And I love that movie. I mean, I really do. And that is just such a recognizable piece for me. And I don't know if it beats out the Conan piece, but it's on my mind a lot when I think about killing Ryan. It's definitely up there. Yeah.
Oh, I'm honored.
Are you talking about Arnold's jacket or Michael Biehn?
Yes, Arnold's jacket.
So the punk jacket with the chain and the studs, the most 80s thing in the movie. It's great. And mine is all shot up, so it's got the the squib hits because we sort of figured out actually in talking about doing your research. We kind of Terminator, the first Terminator was a bit of an independent film. It was made on a very low budget, and usually when you have, like in Terminator 2, there are leather jackets that have one bullet hit, no bullet hits, and then all the bullet hits in them because they had stages. So the wardrobe department, this means there would have been like 50 jackets that they made for the film, so that wherever Arnold was in the story,
insane on the second one, and so they had just leather jackets. Yeah.
Not so on the first one. And we have not been able to find and authenticate a non-bullet hit Terminator 1 jacket. So the punk jacket, the one that he steals from Bill Paxton's buddy at Griffith Observatory at the beginning of the movie. It's funny because it's Bill Paxton, it's the alien bounty hunter from the X-Files, and then the other guy. And then the other guy is the guy the Terminator steals all the clothes from. But he anyway, so mine has all the bullet hits, and in doing the research on it, sort of figured out that everybody that has a real one has the fully shot up version. So we actually think that they must have shot sequentially and then just went through all the jackets in that sequence, hitting it and blowing it up as he got shot up. But mine, I'm pretty sure I have to do a little more research on this before I commit to it, but I'm pretty sure mine matches to the sequence where he sits down to do the surgery on himself when he cuts his eye out after Tech Noir. When he first sits down at the table, there's some blood here that's the droplets seem to match, and if you imagine them kind of spreading and fading over time, the pattern. I have to do a little more research, but it's a great piece. I do love it, but it actually surprises me a little bit.
It's just an incredible piece. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you. There you go.
So another thing y'all mentioned, obviously a lot of times when you're tracking these down, you are meeting with maybe not the people that worked on the movies themselves, but their relatives, their sons, their daughters, whatnot. So have you guys, a little bit of a morbid question, but have you considered what happens to your collection, when you pass on? Do you want your kids to always hang on?
My wife is downstairs considering it right now. She's thinking about it right now. She's rubbing her hands together. And it's delighting her.
I guess I sort of figure, I mean, again, we'll see, as the years go by, it's like, I'm sure at some point, I'm sure things will leave me over time, whatever. But yeah, no, I think about like, oh, this will be for the kids and then they can figure it out. And
Right.
maybe that just means, maybe that means my daughter wants none of it and my son wants it all and they fight and never speak to each other and whatever. And I don't know. But yeah, I guess I try not to think about it, I guess is the answer.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean,
that could be an episode in season 80 of this, Dave, is your children doing the collector jealousy episode and no longer speaking to each other because
do we write our wills live during an episode?
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. No, mine. I think in a serious answer, like obviously, I do think about it. I mean, I do. I think it's a bit sentimental, but I do kind of like the idea that we are just ultimately caretakers of this stuff. And it is going to outlive us and eventually pass us on. I like to think that, I don't need to sell this at any point in my life, that I'm successful enough that I can have it and retire comfortably and just enjoy it. I think some of it I would love if the Academy Museum would want any of the things that I would have. I would love to be able to donate, something to them at the end of the year. I don't know that my collection really fits in with some of it does, but it fits in with the Academy. I don't know how interested they are in Conan the Barbarian, but I think my hope is that my kids like it enough. Maybe they like me enough that they want to keep something to remember me. Right. Maybe in the end, whether they care about because movies are very generational. The stuff that the things that my dad would have collected if he was a collector, not necessarily. There would be some overlap, but not necessarily the things that I would. So I don't know that my kids are going to care, but certainly, the hope is that, somehow it benefits the family somehow when I'm gone.
Yeah. And so is there, most of y'all, the props y'all mentioned are from fantastic, amazing movies, Aliens, Blade Runner, Conan. Is there a prop you either want or have from a movie that's just absolutely terrible, but that it's a terrible movie, but you love the movie, and so that prop maybe is not necessarily the sexiest prop or is going to get the most oohs and ahs, but you either, like I said, either you're looking for it or one that you already have.
I don't know. I mean, I like to think that all of the movies that I collect from are good. I think really everybody does really think that. I'm trying to think. I really don't think that I do. Maybe I did at one point. I don't know, but even that, I don't know. No, I don't think so. I think I've been pretty regimented about it.
I mean, I'm not going to say they're terrible movies, but I have stuff from movies that don't fit into the categories that we're talking, that are not
iconic.
Yes. So, like, for example, I loved the Steve Martin, Eddie Murphy movie Bowfinger from a couple of years back. Sure. And I have a couple of, I have some Mindhead stuff, which was their version of Scientology. Mm-hmm. And I have a fake Chubby Rain, invite to the premiere. And so I have a couple of little odds and ends like that of a movie that I don't think you necessarily put in the category of, Aliens and Blade Runner, right. But I do love, and I love 70s and 80s comedies. And this is another thing we're going to do a show about. They're hard to collect. I mean, I love Meatballs, but what are you going to have for Meatballs? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'd love something from Caddyshack. Maybe that's something that said Bushwood Country Club. But again, I don't know quite what I would find. I'm not sure I would want a golf club. Do you know what I mean? So again, some of these, some of that category is often sort of, I guess, tough to find the again, this is part of that game we were talking about. It's some of these movies don't lend themselves as easily to props, but I do still love them. But they are definitely not big genre movies, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah. I actually do have an answer because it was only in my collection for about 25 minutes. But there was a crew contact that I had acquired things from and liked me enough that it was the son of, it was not the original crew guy, because this crew guy was back in the 70s and 80s, and from time to time he would offer me things that, movies that his father had worked on. And he came to me one time and he was like, I have John Belushi's jacket from 1941.
All right.
and it was, you know, he had this bomber jacket with all these patches on it. It's very, you know, it was actually not patches, but it, like painted or silk screen, so they were actually like printed onto the leather. And you know, it's in every photo that you ever see with him. And I was like, it's John Belushi. It's a Spielberg film, and I bought it because I knew somebody would want it. I just wanted to keep the relationship alive, and it wasn't that much money, so I just bought it. And I remember getting it home, and I was like, this is really cool, but man, that movie is just, I love Spielberg, but that is just not the Spielberg movie that you want to collect from.
When Ryan had that thing, I actually, it's so funny because
you thought about it too.
I thought about it and actually bought the movie on iTunes, and because it's 1941, it's at the top of my iTunes list forever now. And I watched the movie, or at least started watching it, and I was just like, oh, I forgot how this is not good. And then I just started jumping to the Belushi sequences, and then I was just like, I'm not buying that thing. And but I'm haunted by the movie on my iTunes to this day. So yeah.
Yeah, but another collector ended up with it because he's such a mental Spielberg fan that he didn't care. He just wanted it because he loves Spielberg so much. So great. He got it.
I love
a Conan piece out of it.
I love that he loves it. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
No, and I think that is definitely a part of the collecting where there's things that aren't necessarily as important to others, but for you, you know, this is a piece or a movie you really love for whatever reason, the connection to it. And so I think that's kind of an interesting aspect of it, that they're not necessarily, like I said, the most famous pieces, but you love the movie for whatever reason, or the actor, the director, stuff like that. So, well, I mean, that's basically all I have. I certainly appreciate the time. I love talking, collecting with you guys. I feel like it's kind of a shared language. So I was super excited when I listened to the first episode. So definitely, everybody check the podcast out when it comes out. It's The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. It's available wherever podcasts come out. It comes out once a week. Anything else you guys want to add?
If you check out our Instagram or Twitter, which is
at Props Podcast on both.
Right.
Yeah, both Twitter and Instagram at Props Podcast.
Put up pictures of the things we discuss, so you get to see some really great looking props there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thanks for the time, guys. Look forward to the podcast being very successful, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
That'd be fun. Thank you so much.